Hi! This is the part 1 of our video regarding the conic section ellipse. For this video, we will be having the definition of the ellipse as well as the different parts of the ellipse, and also we will be having some examples for us to solve. Now, let us start! By definition, an ellipse is a set of all points in a plane which the sum of whose distance from two fixed points in the plane is constant. So if we are to graph an ellipse, it is either your ellipse is horizontal or itong pahigang graph natin, or your ellipse is vertical or itong patayong ating graph. Siyempre, we have the different parts of our ellipse. For the parts of the ellipse, first, we will be having the center. The point in the middle of the ellipse is called the center and is named edge K, just like the vertex of the parabola and the center of the circle. So, yung ating graph dito sa right side, if you notice, both graphs has the center at the origin. Nasa 0, 0 siya. Ito yung center natin, the yellow point. But in case that we will be having examples of ellipse whose center is not on the origin, therefore, we will be naming that center to be H and K just like any other conic section. The next is the major axis. The major axis is the line that runs through the center of the ellipse the long way. The variable a is the letter used to name the distance from the center to the ellipse on the major axis. The endpoints of the major axis are on the ellipse and are called vertices. So for the major axis, if you notice, meron tayo ditong nakalabel na major axis. Ayan. If your ellipse is horizontal, ito yung pahiga, the major axis ay pahiga din. Bakit? Kasi ito yung pinakamahabang line. Naandito kasi si vertex or yung ating dalawang vertex or yung vertices natin. Okay? In the major axis, nandun si vertex at saka si focus, as well as, syempre dadaan din siya sa center. For our next graph, which is a vertical graph, if you notice, vertical naman yung ating major axis dito since vertical nga siya at ang ating vertex at focus ay nasa y-axis. The third one will be the foci. The foci are the 2 points that dictate how fat or how skinny the ellipse is. They are always located on the major axis and can be found by the following equation. A squared minus b squared is equal to f squared, where a and b are mentioned as in the preceding bullets, and f is the distance from the center to each focus. In some books and tutorials, si f squared dito ay pwedeng maging c squared. So, pwede siyang maging a squared minus b squared is equal to c squared. And then again, c is also equal to the distance from the center to each focus. Let us look at our graph. In our first graph here, our ellipse is vertical. So, if your ellipse is vertical and the center is at the origin, ang focus mo ay isang positive at isang negative. Kapag naman meron tayong horizontal na ellipse, and again, our center is at the origin, parehas lang din, we will be having a positive and a negative focus. Again, it is only applicable if your ellipse is having 0, 0 as its center. Okay? Kasi there will be given na kapag ang iyong center is not in the origin, pwedeng pareha siyang positive or pareha siyang negative depending on your given equation or standard form. For the last part, we will be having the minor axis. The minor axis is perpendicular to the major axis and runs through the center the short way. The variable b is the letter used to name the distance to the ellipse from the center on the minor axis because the major axis is always longer than the minor one. Remember, A is always greater than B. The endpoints on the minor axis are called covertices. So if we are to look on our graphs here on the right side, so yung ating first graph, it is an ellipse which has the center at the origin and it is horizontal. So if it is horizontal, the major axis lies on the x-axis since our center nga is at the origin. So sabi dito sa definition, yung minor axis is perpendicular to the major axis rather. So therefore, our minor axis here is the y-axis. And the endpoints of this minor axis are called covertex or covertices kapag dalawa. Next, if A stands for the vertex and yung C is for the focus, B is the letter used to name the distance to the ellipse from the center of the minor axis. So from this endpoint to the center, and from the center to this endpoint, yan ay letter B. Always remember that A must always be greater than B kasi in case na mag-equal sila, A is equal to B, hindi na siya ellipse. That is called a circle. Now, let us look at the graphs and the standard form of equation of the ellipse. Again, if you have an ellipse that is horizontal and its center is at the origin, your standard form of equation must be x squared over a squared plus y squared over b squared is equal to 1. If in case your ellipse is vertical and the center is at the origin, the standard form of equation will be x squared over b squared plus y squared over a squared is equal to 1. If in case that you have an ellipse that is horizontal and the center is not on the origin, it is at age k, your standard form of equation will be the quantity x minus h squared over a squared plus the quantity of y minus k squared over b squared is equal to 1. If your ellipse is a vertical ellipse and its center is at h and k, not on the origin, your standard form of equation will be the quantity of x minus h squared over b squared plus the quantity of y minus k squared over a squared is equal to 1. If you notice, parehas lang siya ng standard form of equation ng ellipse na ang center ay nasa origin. Ano lang ang nadagdag sa ating equation? Naglagay lang tayo ng h and k, h for x and k for y, since we will be having now the value for our center kasi hindi na siya 0, 0. Before we proceed with our examples, meron ako ditong mga points to remember. Let us not forget that, number 1, in the standard equation, if the x part has a bigger denominator, the ellipse is horizontal. If the y part has the bigger denominator, the ellipse is vertical. Another one, take note that for ellipse, A is always greater than B. Next, if we are looking for the focus, ito yung ating gagamiting equation. We will be having c squared is equal to a squared minus b squared. If we are looking for the covertex, we will be having b squared is equal to a squared minus c squared. And if we are to look for the vertex, we will be having a squared is equal to b squared plus c squared. And also, like any other conic section, you can also transform the standard form of equation of an ellipse in its general form and vice versa. So the general form of the ellipse is like this: ax squared plus by squared plus f is equal to 0, where a is not equal to b having the same sign. This is for the ellipse that has the center at the origin. While if your center is at age k, your general form of equation must be ax squared plus by squared plus dx plus ey plus f is equal to 0. Again, still, A must not be equal to B, and they must have the same sign. Let us now have our example. For our example number 1, let us give the coordinates of the foci, the vertices, and the covertices of the ellipse with the equation x squared over 25 plus y squared over 9 is equal to 1. First, let us identify kung anong klaseng graph meron ito. Ito bang ellipse na ito ay vertical or horizontal? Now, paano natin gagawin yon? Let us look at our equation. Sabi natin kanina, if the denominator of the x part is bigger than the denominator of the y part, understood, our ellipse is horizontal. So, based on our equation, our ellipse is horizontal. Now, later we will be sketching the graph. If our ellipse is horizontal, it must look like this. Ito yung kanyang graph at ito yung kanyang standard form of equation. So, ito yung standard form of equation natin. Now, from the standard form of equation, ito yung magiging pattern natin kung nasan ba si A at saka si B. Yan. So, from our equation, we can get 25 to be our A squared and 9 to be our B squared. So, if our A squared is 25, it is obvious that our A is equal to 5 and our B is equal to 3. Meron na tayong A, meron na tayong B. Wala tayong letter C. So, again, A is for the vertex, B is for the covertex, and C is for the focus. If we are to compute for the C, we will be having yung kanina nating equation na C squared is equal to A squared minus B squared. Since ika-cancel out natin yung squared kay C, kaya nilagyan ko ng square root, kaya naging ganyan. So, substitute lang natin. 25 minus 9 is obviously 16. And the square root of 16 is 4. Therefore, we now have the value of RC, which is 4. Kung meron na tayong value ni A, B, and C, now is the time for us na bigyan na natin ng coordinates si foci, si vertices, at si covertices. What will be our foci? Ito yung ating pattern. If our ellipse is horizontal and has the center at 0, 0 or at the origin, ito yung ating pattern. So, yung foci natin, si C, which is 4, lalagyan natin isang negative, isang positive. So, we will be having the coordinates of negative 4, 0 and positive 4, 0. Kapag naman kay vertex, meron tayong negative A, 0 and A, 0, since A is the letter that represents the vertex. So, since our letter A is equal to 5, we will be having negative 5, 0 and 5, 0 to be our vertices. And for the covertex, since it is perpendicular, if you notice, ang ating foci at vertex or vertices ay nasa x-axis kasi nga siya ay horizontal. Since covertices are perpendicular, nasa y siya. Nasa y-axis siya. So, therefore, our covertices are at 0, negative 3, kasi ang ating B ay 3, and 0, positive 3. Ayan. Having the information and the coordinates that we got earlier, we can now graph. So we are to graph first our foci. Ayan siya. We will be having 4 units to the left and 4 units to the right. And then, our vertices are 5 units to the left, since 5 siya, negative 5, and 5 units to the right, we have positive 5. And for our co-vertices, we will be having 3 units to upward and 3 units downward, or 3 units on the positive and the negative side. So therefore, after having these points, we can now plot our ellipse. And it looks like this one. This is the graph of our ellipse for our example number 1. If we are to find out the length of our major axis and the minor axis, ang gagawin lang natin is to multiply a certain letter by 2. Paano yon? If we are to find out our major axis or the length of our major axis, we will just be multiplying our letter A by 2. So, 2 times 5, we will be having 10 as the length of our major axis. And then, if we are to find out the length of our minor axis, we must multiply the value of B to 2. So, 3 times 2 will be equal to 6. Therefore, the length of our major axis is 6. For us to check, you can go back to your graph and then count. So, we will be having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 units. This is our major axis, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units for our minor axis. Let us have example number 2. Sketch the graph of the ellipse that has a general form of equation of 25x squared plus 9y squared is equal to 225. Determine the length of the major and the minor axis and the coordinates of the vertices, the foci, and the endpoints of the minor axis. So for our example number 2, we will be getting the general form of equation. If you notice, naka-general form siya. So for us to get the value of the foci, the vertex, the vertices, the co-vertices, we need first to transform this general form of equation into its standard form. So, paano siya? Ang una natin gagawin, i-divide natin siya sa 225 since ang kailangan natin is for the right side to be equal to 1. Kasi di ba ang standard form of equation ng ating ellipse is laging equal to 1. Okay, magiging ganito siya. 25x squared over 225 plus 9y squared over 225 is equal to 225 divided by 225. If we are to simplify, ang magiging sagot natin is x squared over 9 plus y squared over 25 is equal to 1. Therefore, nandito na tayo ngayon sa kanyang standard form of equation. Now, let us now analyze. If you notice, in our equation, the denominator of the y part is bigger than the denominator of the x part. Therefore, ang ating ellipse is vertical. Ayan. Meaning, the major axis lies on the y-axis. Since this is an ellipse which has the center of 0, 0 or at the origin. Paano ang itsura ng graph at ang kanyang standard form of equation? Ganito siya. Vertical tayo. And if you notice, ang kanyang standard form of equation, si b squared ang nauuna sa denominator kesa sa ka squared since yun ngang nauna nating denominator is smaller than the second one. Ayan. This will be our standard form of equation for our ellipse in our example number 2. After identifying if our ellipse is vertical or horizontal and getting the standard form of equation, ayan, nilagay ko siya dito, for us to have a pattern, since merong mga nagkakamali na lagi nilang ina-assume na si A ay nasa unahan, which is not true for this form of equation since our ellipse is vertical. Okay? So now, we are to get the value of A squared. Our A squared is equal to 25 kasi ayun si A squared. So if we are to get the value of A, our A is now 5. Since square root of 25 is 5. For our B squared, we will be having 9. And for our B, we will be having 3. So again, if we are to find out, ito yung unang tanong, the length of the major axis, sabi ko kanina, for us to get the length of the major axis, we need to multiply letter A by 2. So we will be having 10 as our length for our major axis. Now, we now have letter A and letter B. Letter C is missing. Letter C is needed for us to get the coordinates of the foci. So, for us to get, let us compute. C is equal to the square root of A squared minus B squared is equal to 4. So, therefore, letter C is equal to 4. And for us to get the length of the minor axis, we need to multiply this letter B here by 2. So, 2 times 3 is equal to 6. Our major axis is 10 and our minor axis is 6. After having that, let us now go to the pattern. Yung ating pattern, if you notice, kung i-compare natin siya sa ating example number 1, yung example number 1 natin has an ellipse that is horizontal. Yung kanyang A at C ay nasa X part kasi horizontal siya. At ang vertices niya, si B ay nasa Y. And since in our example number 2, our ellipse is vertical, therefore, yung kanyang letter A at letter C for the foci and the vertices ay nasa Y. At since perpendicular naman si minor axis kay major, si B naman ngayon ang nasa X. Having the following information, let us now get the coordinates of the foci, the vertices, and the co-vertices para mag-graph na rin natin sila. So, the foci is at 0, 4, and 0, -4. Since ang ating letter C is equal to 4. Okay? The vertices, which is the letter A, is at 0, 5 and 0, -5. And the coordinates of the minor axis or our co-vertices is at 3, 0 and -3, 0. Let us graph our ellipse. The foci is at 0, +4 and 0, -4. So 4 units, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 units above and 4 units below the center. And then the vertices is 5 units above and below the center. Ayan siya. Siyempre, lagi magkasama si vertex at si focus. And our co-vertex or co-vertices are in -3, 0 and +3, 0, which is 3 units to the left and to the right of the center. Ayan ang ating co-vertices. And if we are to draw our ellipse, it looks like this. Ayan. So, kanina nabanggit na natin na ang ating major axis ay may length na 10. Ayan siya, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 units. And length naman ng ating minor axis is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, this is our graph for our example number 2, which is an example of an ellipse that is vertical. Well, that was it. I hope you learned something. Thank you for watching. See you again in our next video.